A crown prince stands in the shadow of a dirt-floored war tent, the smell of sweat and iron still hanging heavy in the hot air. But if you look closer at the brutal political reality of the ancient Near East, at the specific items dropping into the dust, this is not a sudden loss of temper. It is an attempted execution. The sound of the vibrating metal rings in the silent room. The entire court freezes. Jonathan stands up from the table. The text says he rises in fierce anger. He refuses to eat a single bite of the feast. He turns his back on the king and walks out. He is not grieving for his own near-death experience. He is not terrified of the spear. The text explicitly notes that Jonathan is grieved for David. The quiet surrender has just drawn real violence. The treason is no longer a secret kept in a tent. The next morning, Jonathan leaves the suffocating stone halls of the palace. He walks out into the open country. The morning air is sharp. The dew is still on the grass. A young servant boy walks behind him. Jonathan is holding his bow. He is holding 3 arrows. He is walking out to the field to warn the shepherd that he must run for his life. But before the prince sends his friend into a long, brutal exile, he demands a promise. And the word he uses for that promise carries a weight that stretches far beyond the grave. We are still in the field in 1 Samuel chapter 20. The arrows have been shot. The young servant has been sent back to the city. At the invisible architecture of the text itself, you start to see something the sentimentality completely misses. This is not a lesson on finding a companion. The 2 men are standing alone in the tall, dry grass. David is about to disappear into a brutal, years-long exile in the caves of the Judean wilderness. Jonathan knows he is looking at the future king of Israel, and before they weep and part ways, Jonathan asks David for a vow. He looks at the fugitive and says, "If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever." The English translation uses the word kindness or steadfast love. It sounds soft. It sounds like a polite, sentimental request for future favors between 2 friends. But the word Jonathan actually speaks in the Hebrew text, changes the entire legal weight of the conversation. He asks for hesed. Hesed is perhaps the most untranslatable word in the entire Old Testament. It appears nearly 250 times, and English Bibles struggle constantly to capture its massive scope, rendering it as mercy, grace, or loving kindness. But its root meaning goes far deeper than affection. Hesed is covenant loyalty. It is the fierce, stubborn, legally binding devotion that exists between 2 parties who have cut a barrett. It is the exact same word the prophets will later use to describe God's relentless, agonizing commitment to Israel when they worship other gods. It is a love that refuses to break a vow. It is the anatomy of a bloodless abdication. To feel the weight of what is actually happening here, even when the other party deserves to be abandoned. Hesed is not a spontaneous emotion. It is a blood oath obligation. Look at the political reality Jonathan is navigating. He is not asking for a favor. He is making a calculated, desperate legal demand based on the brutal arithmetic of ancient empires. He knows how the transfer of power works. When a new king takes the throne, he eliminates the bloodline of the previous monarch. He hunts down the sons, the grandsons, the nephews. He puts them to the edge of the iron sword to ensure no rival can ever rally a rebellion and claim the crown. Jonathan is staring at the man who will soon wear his crown, and he is laying a legal claim on his mercy. He is binding David's hands with the invisible chains of the covenant they cut back in the tent. He is saying, "When you finally take the throne, do not wipe my unborn children off the face of the earth." Jonathan is not just securing his own survival. He is securing a future he knows he will never live to see. The prince understands that his own father's madness will eventually pull the house of Saul into the grave, and he is building a legal ark to save his descendants from the flood. David swears the oath. You have to look at the 2 men standing in the room. Jonathan is the heir apparent. He is the eldest son of King Saul. They weep until the salt dries on their skin, and the shepherd flees into the wasteland. The covenant is sealed. The word is spoken, but that invisible thread of Hesed is about to be tested one final time in the dark. The wilderness of Ziph is thick and suffocating. The limestone caves are damp. The heat is relentless. The fugitive is breaking. David has been running for months. He sleeps with one eye open, gripping a stolen sword, jumping at the snap of every dry branch. Saul's army is combing the desert ravines, their bronze armor clanking in the distance. The king is hunting the shepherd like a wild animal. David is exhausted, hollowed out by the constant adrenaline of survival. The anointing oil poured on his head by Samuel must feel like a distant, cruel joke. And then, the brush parts. Jonathan walks into the clearing. An entire royal army cannot find the fugitive. But the prince walks directly to his hiding place. He does not bring rations. He does not bring an armed escort. He brings the invisible, unbreakable weight of the covenant. The text in 1 Samuel 23 says that Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Look at the lyrical rhythm of the reversal. The shepherd once calmed the troubled king with a harp. Now the prince calms the troubled shepherd with a promise. The reigning monarch of a newly unified, highly unstable Israel. Jonathan is not a child. He is a seasoned, lethal military commander. He looks at a man covered in dust, starving in the woods, surrounded by enemies, and he speaks the kingdom into existence. He says, "Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you." It is a beautiful, tragic vision. It is also a vision that will never come to pass, because Jonathan will not be next to him. Jonathan will die on the blood-soaked slopes of Mount Gilboa. He will be struck down by Philistine archers, his royal armor stripped, his headless body nailed to the stone wall of Bethshan. This quiet meeting in the choking heat of the woods, with the smell of dry pine and sweat in the air, is the very last time the two men will ever see each other alive. But before Jonathan turns and walks back into the forest, they renew the Berit. They cut the covenant one last time before the Lord. He does not ask for a military alliance. He asks for the survival of his blood. Jonathan is securing a future for a little boy, sitting in the royal nursery back in the capital. A toddler named Mephibosheth, who will soon be dropped by a fleeing nurse, crippled in both feet, and left completely at the mercy of the new regime. Jonathan uses his final moments with David to throw the protective blanket of Hesed, who has already routed entire Philistine garrisons with just his armor-bearer at his side. He is the undeniable future of the nation, over a crippled child who cannot walk. The prince leaves the woods. The shepherd stays in the desert. The covenant waits in the shadows. But this ancient tragedy does not just belong to the dust of Judah, because the tension tearing Jonathan apart reveals a phantom kingdom that most of us are currently trying to rule. The tragedy of Saul is that he spends the entire second half of his life fighting a ghost. He is clutching a phantom kingdom. He grips the heavy iron spear until his knuckles turn white. He exhausts his military, alienates his children, and slowly loses his grip on reality, all because he refuses to surrender a throne that heaven has already stripped away. Saul is terrified of empty hands, and we are exactly like him. We build our own phantom kingdoms. We construct a rigid architecture for our lives, a specific career trajectory, a carefully curated reputation, an unshakable expectation of what our future is supposed to look like. We put on the heavy, polished armor of our own ambition, assuming we know exactly how. The narrative of our life must play out. And then the Spirit of God moves the anointing. The promotion goes to the person who just walked into the room. The ministry we poured our blood into begins to dismantle. The season we thought would last forever suddenly dries up. David is a nobody from Bethlehem. He has no pedigree, no military rank, no political leverage. He smells like sheep dirt and river stones, leaving us sitting at the head of a silent table, gripping the wooden shaft of a spear, staring at an empty chair and wondering where the glory went. We try to force the old doors to stay open. We demand that people still recognize our authority, our position, our right to be in the center of the room. When God shifts the geography of our calling, we usually react like the maddened king. We throw things. We fight to maintain control. We desperately try to hold together a reality that heaven has already moved past. But Jonathan offers a completely different blueprint for the human soul. Jonathan recognizes the movement of God, and he does not fight to stop the wind. He looks at the shepherd. He sees the invisible oil resting on his head, and he voluntarily reaches for the buckle of his own sword. He strips off the woven linen of his own ambition and hands it over in the dust, choosing to submit to God's future rather than defend his own past. This is not a passive resignation. It is a supreme act of spiritual violence against the ego. It is the hardest kind of death. To die the death of a dream you were entirely qualified to fulfill. True devotion to the God of Israel requires an agonizing willingness to let go of the throne you thought you were born to sit on. It demands the terrifying vulnerability of standing in a dirt-floored. When Jonathan strips off his royal garments and hands over his weapons, he is not offering a congratulatory gift to a brave soldier. Bastard as Mapple. Taking off the very things that give you identity and authority, and trusting that the covenant you carry is stronger than the crown you lose. Jonathan gave away the empire, but that loss was actually securing an inheritance he could never have built with a sword. A prince stripped off his royal armor in a dusty tent, and a bloodless abdication began. A warrior broke an enemy garrison with a rare iron sword and handed that exact blade to his greatest rival. Two men cut a violent, flesh-tearing oath in the shadows and bound their bloodlines together. A paranoid monarch hurled a spear across a royal feast and shattered the last illusion of his own dynasty. A royal heir demanded the legal weight of Hesed in a dry field and built an ark to save his unborn children. A fugitive starved in the suffocating heat of Ziph, and a friend walked out of the trees to speak the kingdom into his chest. A crippled child was left vulnerable in a palace nursery and survived because of a covenant he did not cut. Same promise. Same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the rare iron sword. In the ancient world, clothing carried your identity. Weapons carried your authority. By taking the physical symbols of his right to rule, one of only two in the entire nation, we are told all our lives to fight for our seat, to guard our iron, to secure our own empire at all costs. And yet, the man who scaled the jagged rock at Michmash, the man who terrified an entire garrison and held the absolute right to rule, chose to become nothing so that the anointed king could rise. Your greatest spiritual victory might not look like conquering an enemy. It might look like handing over your weapons. If you are in a season where God is asking you to step out of the armor you have worn for years, this story is a place to sit. If you are watching someone else receive the promotion, the ministry, or the future you thought had your name on it, do not grip the spear. Do not barricade yourself in the dining hall fighting a ghost. The deepest kind of Hesed, the fiercest covenant loyalty, is often forged in the terrifying act of letting go. And may the God who honors the quiet surrender of the human heart walk with you as you lay down your own crown, and remind you that a seat at his table is infinitely better than a throne of your own making, and placing them onto the shoulders of a shepherd. The crown prince is committing an act of absolute treason against his own bloodline, and he reaches for the buckle of his sword. He takes off his royal robe. He unstraps his armor. The text tells us that Jonathan loved David as his own soul. We tend to read that through the lens of modern emotion, picturing two guys who share the same values and promise to have each other's backs. But in the royal courts of the ancient world, love was not just a feeling. It was a political reality. Jonathan is initiating something far more dangerous than friendship. But to understand why this moment is so shocking, you have to understand who Jonathan was before David ever showed up with a sling. Israel is not an empire. It is a fragile experiment. When Saul takes the throne, the nation is little more than a collection of scattered tribes, huddling in the hills. They are surrounded. They are outgunned. The Philistines hold a strict monopoly on iron forging, meaning the Israelite army does not actually look like an army. They fight with sharpened plowshares. They fight with bronze pitchforks. They fight with farming axes. According to the historical record, there are only 2 iron swords in the entire nation. Saul holds one. Jonathan holds the other. He is the singular military hope of a desperate people. And he does not sit in a command tent waiting for favorable odds. Long before David steps into the valley of Elah, Jonathan alters the geography of the war by himself. He removes his bow, his leather belt, his dagger, and he hands every piece of it to a shepherd boy. The historical account in 1 Samuel 14 reads like an ancient thriller. Jonathan leaves the Israelite camp with only his armor-bearer. He targets a Philistine garrison perched on a sheer cliff face at Michmash. He climbs the jagged rock on his hands and knees. He scales the wall. He breaches the camp. He kills 20 men within the space of half an acre. The earth actually trembles. The text describes a panic gripping the Philistine ranks. A sheer terror that causes the enemy lines to collapse and turn on each other. Jonathan triggers an earthquake of military victory with nothing but the cold edge of rare iron and a fierce conviction in his chest. Look at his resume. He is fearless. He is lethal. He is deeply devoted to the God of Israel. To be the crown prince in the ancient Near East is not a ceremonial title. It is a brutal political reality. Saul's dynasty is brand new, entirely unproven. There is no established precedent for the transfer of power. If the kingdom falls to an outsider, the outsider will do what every ancient usurper does to secure the throne: execute every living member of the previous royal family. Jonathan's survival, and the survival of his future children, depends entirely on him taking the crown. He is everything a nation could possibly want in a future king, who is still dripping with the blood of a severed head. The ground outside the tent is still chaotic, with the morning's violence. When we read the story of David, we tend to reduce Jonathan to a supporting role. We treat him like a loyal sidekick, a convenient stepping stone placed there by history to help the real protagonist reach the throne. We picture him as a soft, passive prince who was happy to step aside and cheer from the sidelines. That is a complete misreading of the man. Jonathan is not a secondary character, waiting for a savior. He is the savior. He is the apex predator of the Israelite military. He holds the pedigree. He holds the weapon. He holds the hearts of the men who watched him scale a cliff and break an army with his bare hands. The throne is his by right of birth, and it is his by right of blood spilt. And yet, he takes that rare iron sword, the symbol of his power, the defense of his bloodline, one of only 2 in the entire country, and he hands it to a shepherd. To understand why an apex predator voluntarily removes his own teeth, you have to look at the specific Hebrew word used in the dirt-floored tent. We are back in the tent. The dust from the valley of Elah is still settling outside. David stands in the center of the room, adrenaline still vibrating in his veins, still holding the oversized weapon of a dead giant. King Saul is nearby, sitting in his own royal pavilion. The Philistine army, terrified by the sudden collapse of their champion, has just broken rank and scattered into the Judean hills, his mind already spinning with the dark. Paranoid calculations of a monarch watching a new hero rise. Saul is already beginning to view David as a threat, but Jonathan walks toward the threat. He does not ask for David's resume. He does not demand an oath of loyalty to the house of Saul. Instead, he begins to dismantle his own identity, piece by piece. The text in 1 Samuel 18 says that Jonathan and David made a covenant, but to our modern ears, a covenant sounds like a legal contract. We picture a piece of parchment, a signature, a polite agreement between 2 parties to look out for each other. We sanitize the ancient reality. In the brutal world of the ancient Near East, agreements were not signed in ink. They were sealed in blood. The physical act taking place in this dim, hot tent is profoundly tactile. The sharp clank of the rare iron sword transferring hands. The woven linen of the royal tunic sliding over the rough. Unwashed wool of a shepherd's coat. The thick leather of the prince's armor, pressing against a chest that, until this morning, was completely unprotected. When an ancient ruler formed a treaty with a lesser vassal state, the lesser king paid tribute. The lesser king bowed. The lesser king surrendered his weapons as a public display of submission. Jonathan reverses the entire ancient order. He takes the posture of the conquered. He voluntarily disarms himself in front of a boy. The valley of Elah is ringing with the shouts of Israelites chasing them down. The giant is dead, who poses the single greatest threat to his own dynasty. He takes the very sword that broke the Philistine lines at Michmash, the blade that was supposed to defend his family's grip on the throne, and presses it into the hands of a rival. This is not a gesture of mutual respect. It is a coronation in the shadows. Jonathan looks at the shepherd, looks at the invisible weight of God's choosing that rests on him, and makes a choice that defies every survival instinct of a royal heir. He chooses the calling of God over the preservation of his own empire. But the depth of what Jonathan is actually doing here, the sheer, staggering danger of this moment, is locked inside the specific word the Hebrew text uses to describe their bond. Because in the ancient world, you do not make what Jonathan and David are making. And understanding the verb changes the entire story. Look at the text of 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3. The English translation gives us a simple, almost sterile fact. It says that Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. But the word translated as covenant is the Hebrew noun berit, and the verb placed right next to it in the text is the Hebrew word karat. Karat does not mean to make, but inside this quiet tent, an even larger giant is falling. Most people read this scene in 1 Samuel chapter 18. It does not mean to write, or decide, or to agree. Karat means to cut, to sever, to tear flesh apart. In the ancient Near East, you did not make a covenant. You cut one. It is the exact same verb used centuries earlier in Genesis chapter 15, when God tells Abraham to take animals, cut them directly down the middle, and lay the bloody carcasses on the sand. A smoking firepot and a flaming torch then pass between the severed pieces in the dark. The imagery was a universally understood legal threat. It carried a violent, physical implication. May my own body be torn apart, just like these animals, if I fail to keep my word to you. This is not a gentleman's agreement. It is a death sentence for betrayal. If the sheer weight of these ancient words is shifting how you see the text, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So Jonathan binds his life to a shepherd. He is not just offering camaraderie, he is offering his throat. By cutting a berit with David, Jonathan is legally and spiritually linking his own pulse to the fate of a man his father is already planning to destroy, and assume they are watching the beginning of a beautiful friendship. They read it as a heartwarming story about two young men. In the political reality of the ancient world, a secret alliance forged between a sitting crown prince and a rapidly rising military commander is not a friendship. It is a conspiracy. It is high treason. Jonathan is choosing a rival over his own royal blood. He is choosing the anointed over the established. He is choosing the future God has decreed over the empire his father has built. The prince recognizes the invisible oil poured on the shepherd's head, and he steps off his own throne before he ever gets the chance to sit on it. But a treason this quiet cannot stay hidden forever, because the man currently sitting on the throne is descending into madness. And eventually, the cost of this covenant will have to be paid in public. The royal table is set. The new moon festival begins. King Saul sits at the head of the feast, his back pressed firmly against the stone wall. His knuckles are white. The heavy iron spear, the weapon of his paranoia, rests uncomfortably close to his chair. Abner, the commander of the army, takes his seat. Jonathan takes his, but one chair is empty. Day 1 passes. The roasted meat is served. The clay cups are filled. Saul watches the empty space at the table. He says nothing. He breathes heavy, assuming it is a ceremonial issue, a temporary absence, who immediately connect. A biblical blueprint for finding a loyal buddy in a lonely world. And it does carry that kind of fierce devotion. Day 2 begins. The feast continues. The chair is still completely empty. The king's paranoia boils over. He demands to know where the son of Jesse is. Jonathan steps directly into the line of fire. He delivers the alibi they agreed upon. He tells his father that David asked permission to run down to Bethlehem for a family sacrifice. The dining hall explodes. Saul does not just raise his voice. He erupts into a violent, venomous rage. The king stands up. He screams across the food, insulting Jonathan's mother, calling his own flesh and blood the son of a perverse and rebellious woman. But listen to the specific words Saul yells in verse 31. "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established." Saul sees it. He understands exactly what the prince has done. Saul is not blind to the covenant. He is staring at a crown prince who is actively dismantling his own dynasty. The father is fighting a bloody, desperate war to secure the throne for his son. The father is trying to hand Jonathan the empire, and the son refuses to take it. The rejection breaks the king's mind. Saul reaches for the iron spear. He grips the shaft. He draws his arm back. He hurls the weapon directly at his own child. The heavy iron tears through the air of the dining hall. It misses Jonathan's flesh by inches and slams violently into the wall.